All right. Who put the bomb in Bommal? Hello, everyone. This is Bront CatHerder, and we are talking Raid Shadow Legends and having some fun here with Bommal in Doom Tower. It is that time again for the rotation with Bommal and Dark Fae, and Bommal seems to be a sticking point for a lot of people. He's probably the toughest singular Doom Tower boss. And we're going to take a look at a couple different ways that you can get by with him. We'll look at a solo champion for him, and we'll look at two different teams and how I use them, and generally how you can construct a team to take down Bommel. So let's go take a look first of all at his skills. As we're looking right here, again, I really suggest using the boss guides. They're very helpful if you're struggling to understand the boss. Generally, they can be pretty easy to understand. Sometimes they're a little confusing, but Polarium did a good job of actually putting these in there so you can read the skills ahead of time. So he's got an A1 that attacks all enemies, decreases his bomb, the bomb debuff detonation countdown by 1, and instantly activates any HP burns if there's HP burns on the champions. He's got an AoE, places HP burns, and then they will receive additional damage from bombs as well. Removes all buffs from all enemies, then attacks them, and then places a bomb debuff for each buff that he removes. This is why resistance teams can be very effective. This is also why solo teams avoid buffs when possible. Finally, you've got Dread Millions here, places an increased attack buff on Bommal for 5 turns, then summons 2 extra Dread Bombs and grants an extra turn. So you can actually block this buff if you can get block debuffs on him, but there's reasons not to be debuffing him as well, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Increase attack is protected, so it's very difficult to remove, and since bombs are powered by attack, that's not great. He also summons extra one of these bombs that decrease every time you decrease his turn meter. So these bombs are what make Bommal hard. They will do somewhere between 20 to 40% true max HP damage to your champions. There's a little bit of wiggle room with that, but overall they do a good chunk of damage, and that's generally what tends to kill people, because when they go off, both of them go off back to back, and they do an absolute ton of damage. Being able to do 40% true damage, max HP hit, it's pretty gross. And that's actually what a lot of the teams center around, is either using that to your advantage or in finding ways to avoid it entirely. They're basically your two strategies for the teams. Anytime any places a debuff, Bomb will places a bomb on the champion. That's why you don't want to use a lot of debuffs. So you need to be careful with what debuffs you are placing and why you're placing them. Bombs that detonate have a chance of placing stun. They also have a chance of lighting people on fire. This is a reason that you don't want a lot of bombs out there if you can avoid it, of the debuff kind on your champion. He's then got the normal stuff of immune to turn meter control, immune to strengthen, and turn meter resistance by 50%, which is a general Doom Tower thing. So overall, he's a very tough boss. The good news is they did actually nerf him quite a bit. He used to be very hard even on the normal floors. He's now much easier on the normal floors, and in fact, for some of the earlier normal floors, you can just take a team to do damage to him, and eventually you'll kill him. For the harder floors, the amount of max HP damage those spide bombs do goes up pretty tremendously, and it's once you're at hard 50 and then hard 90, I think it's at the maximum 40 or 50%, which is actually pretty gross. So let's go take a look at the team I've got. First, we're going to take a look at a solo team that you might be able to see in the background here, and we'll discuss how you build the champions and what I'm doing with the team. All right, so first off, we're on my alt, and this team is capable of doing Bommal hard all the way up to hard 90, and it relies on Lady Annabelle to solo the boss. There's a few other champions that can solo the boss. Crimson Helm, for example, and Baron Gary is another one that can do it. Baron Gary, it's difficult to do at the higher levels, and Crimson Helm is a manual team that takes an awful lot of time. It's about a 15 or 20 minute manual run, so I really don't recommend it. I don't consider that a particularly good solution, although if that's what you have, that's certainly an option. Lady Annabelle is great, and we'll go into her kit just a little bit. Deliana's here because Deliana offers an HP buff to everybody on the team with her aura, and that's very helpful in getting Lady Annabelle to survive. If you're worried about speed, you could certainly go with a speed aura instead. Basically, you're looking for a champion that has a good aura for Lady Annabelle and is not so tanky that they're not going to die. Deliana's good because she helps keep everyone alive on the waves, because she's got some good healing. She does a decent amount of damage, so she can help with the wave clear as well, and that's all good. I've got Thea here, and you'll notice my Thea is not really built. That's because she has no gear on her, and she is entirely there to die to give Lady Annabelle additional stats when she dies with some of the masteries that she's got. Same with your Carl. Your Carl's got no gear on him. It could be any champion. You can bring food if you want, although you don't get experience in Doom Tower, so food's not going to help. I've got Harima here. Harima, this is my arena nuker on this account, but really she's here for wave clear. In addition to the wave clear, as you can see, she does her punishment, which is the reduces target's defense and increases her defense. This will often just kill a wave as well because it'll activate her AoE. And then I also like to have her try to use this decreased defense on Bommal once or twice, just to get a little bit of decrease away to make it a little bit faster for Lady Annabelle. This is not required. This is just something I do because it helps quite a bit. And finally, we have Lady Annabelle. So we can see here, I pretty much don't have her doing her A3 at all because we don't care if everyone revives on death. In fact, we don't want these food champions to survive onto the boss if we can avoid it. During round 1 and round 2, she'll do her A1 or A2, but she doesn't have a lot of accuracy, as you can see, so she's not going to be landing a lot of debuffs. What we're in here for is she's got an A1 that attacks 2 times and heals her by 3% of her max HP. So this is the equivalent of having 2 additional immortal sets on her. So that's an extra 6% max HP healing every time she does her A1. On top of that, her the Red Lady passive heals her by 50% of their HP whenever an ally or enemy dies. And this is the key to keeping her alive. Every time one of those bombs on the side of Bommal goes off, it does 40% damage to her. She then heals 50% damage immediately before the next one even goes off. So those bombs are doing effectively nothing to her, keeping her alive. That allows her to basically regenerate and slowly but surely work on taking down the boss. You can build her for damage if you want to. You want to build her tanky. So you'll see I've got 75,000 HP on her. I've got 3.5k defense on her. I've got her at 255 speed. I actually have a fairly high crit rate, but not 100%. The crit rate was just to add a little extra damage. So if I hit and do extra damage, that's great. It was not needed. And in fact, if you can't get the stats you're looking for with crit rate, don't bother with crit rate. It's not really that big of a deal. I just was able to do it, so I put her on here. She is in regeneration and immortal gear, and we'll go over her masteries in just a second. But overall, she's only going to do her A1 against the boss, and with the 15% healing from regeneration gear, the 3% from the immortal gear, plus the additional 6% she's getting from her nail, she's regenerating almost 25% of her max HP every time she takes a turn and attacks. And that's what's keeping her alive, in addition to the Red Lady feature that is doing some additional healing whenever the other bombs go off. So that's why Lady Annabelle is so good. Now, how fast does she have to be? I've built her with less HP for other accounts. I've built her with less defense for other accounts. I've built her with less speed for other accounts. The more speed, the faster she'll kill people. The more attack, the faster she'll kill people. The more crit rate and crit damage, the faster she'll kill things. The HP and defense are kind of questionable. I've struggled with the hard 90 around 50k HP and 2.5k defense. That has worked just fine on 50. That has worked just fine on 10 as well. Probably I would aim for around 60k HP and aim for around 3k defense, but those are guideline numbers. As far as the speed goes, as fast as possible is great. The faster she is, the less HP and defense she actually needs because she's taking a few more turns. Overall, I'd prefer to get her at 255 because that means that she takes a turn before the boss. The boss, I believe, is 250 speed. There's a lot of flexibility in it. If you can get it to work, that's great. The good news is it's actually not that hard to build. And we'll show you her gear and her masteries. So here is my Lady Annabelle. Again, we've gone over the stats. We've got the 75k HP, 3.5k defense, 255 speed. As you can see, I've got 4-piece regeneration and 2-piece immortal here. I've even got some 5-star gear. Gear is not super special. I mean, this is a trip speed, but other than that, the flat HP is helpful but not great. Flat defense and speed here. Mostly getting the speeds were kind of important. And then we've got an HP banner, amulet, and ring, and then a defense percent chest, as well as a crit rate gloves. If this was an HP percent chest, I would probably expect to have defense on one of the three bottom sets here. And to be fair, I could probably go defense on one of these as well and still be just fine. As I mentioned before, the stats are probably a little flexible. You can probably go slower. In fact, I've built a Lady Annabelle about 220 speed that works just fine. I've done it with 60k HP. I've done it with about 2.5 to 3k defense. Overall, you kind of want to aim for about the 60 to 65k HP and about the 3k defense, and about a 230 to 40 speed is probably where I would recommend aiming. If you can do better, that's great. Overall, we'll take a look at our masteries quickly too, because they actually can be very important. Now we went the offense tree because War Master makes this significantly faster because you're getting a pretty decent sized chunk with War Master. Works fine without War Master, works fine without masteries, but again, that helps. Give her a little more HP here, and then additional heals cast by this champion. Since all of these heals count as being cast by this champion, all the healing down here helps. And then she gets an additional 8 speed for each dead ally right here. She'll do some additional defense if she kills anybody. That's not super important. Wrath of the Slain increase the damages she does for dead allies, stacking up to 10%. That can cut your run down a little bit. Otherwise, pretty standard masteries down here. Crit rate, crit damage because you can. She's never going to be at max HP because she's constantly taking damage. So this gives you a little bit more damage if she's below 50% max HP. It's the only other one that makes any sense. And then overall, if she starts killing enemies, she gets a little more speed. Unlikely on the waves, but it's possible. So that is Lady Annabelle. Everyone else, the builds aren't super important. As we mentioned, you've got 2 of them for some damage. Let's go take a look at the run and see how this works. I am not going to sit through the entire Bommal run because this is not a fast team, but I'll just show you kind of quickly what happens when we're at the run. All right, so here we go. Got my Harima taking down one of the waves. And we got some of the fodder dying, which is fine. Waves really aren't a big problem. They'll certainly be a little slower for the higher levels, but here we're at the boss already. As you can see, Lady Annabelle is already doing some of her healing, and people are dropping down. So those big bombs are really the big problem. And as they continue to do damage, and this is why you want to have her solo. You can see how she's been stunned right now. You don't want her to be stunned too often if she can. So big bombs went off, everybody died. You can see she's at nearly max HP, and from here it's just a matter of she's gonna mostly regenerate her way up and keep herself near full, and she's never dropping below even half against this is Bommal 10. So this is obviously, as I said, she's a very overbuilt for Bommal 10. She's built for Bommal 90. But Bommal 90 is still very safe as well. She's rarely below 50%. And overall, she's just knocking around the boss and able to survive the different bombs going off and goes through the tier. So we'll fast forward to when the boss is done. All right, so we're through Bommal. It took just under 5 minutes. This is floor 10. It certainly takes longer on the higher levels because you're doing less damage overall. War Master really speeds this up quite a bit because when Lady Annabelle is smacking, she's smacking for maybe 3k per hit, so she's doing maybe 6k damage. And then War Master is doing a good, 30 to 50k damage every time that smacks. So War Master helps a ton. Definitely worth going War Master. Speeds this up quite a bit, but not needed. You can do it without having the masteries. It does make the stats requirements a little bit harder just because you get some extra stats from the masteries. Overall, this is how you solo with Lady Annabelle. You have a somewhat disposable team. You have a couple people that can help you hit through damage. You bring a couple of extra champions and get her speed up, and boom, you're done. It's not super heavily investment because the champions that you're building for getting through the waves are champions you're building for other content instead, and all you're building is a Lady Annabelle. And depending on where your gear level is, it might be some of your better regeneration gear. It may not be some of your better regeneration gear, but it can stay on Lady Annabelle. She's actually okay in faction wars if you're going to build her like that for especially early and mid-game accounts. She'll keep herself alive at least, and the very least can solo through some of them for farming at least. Probably not going to be good for your 3 stars. And, you know, she can actually be pretty helpful in some of the Centranos waves as well. So definitely recommend building Lady Annabelle if you get a copy of one. So at least hold on to her if you decide not to build her right away. But she's great for Dreadhorn. Let's go take a look at 2 other teams on my main. We're going to look at both a more bomb damage focused team that deals with some of the resistance mechanics, and then we're going to deal with a full-blown tank and reflect damage build. So this is the team that I run on my main against floor 10, and I believe I can run it against floor 50 as well. It's not great. It's certainly not optimized for floor 90, but it does work and it shows how you can deal with this. I use Tatora, who is a fusion for me. Nishak, who's one of the better bomb champions, and again, another fusion. Vogoth is great for reflecting some damage. Rector Drath brings a lot of resistance to the table, and then Geomancer helps reflect a lot of damage as well. And Geomancer's Corey in the other harder team I deal with as well. I just have to deal with a slower team there because he needs to reflect more of the damage. So Tatora's job is generally to keep resistances up, keep veils up, in addition to Rector, keep the veils up. He also brings this block debuffs and increased defense, as well as this perfect veil and shield that he brings as well. Where he is super useful, though, is that he also has this 100% chance to decrease accuracy, and this is very critical against Bommal. Bommal has an incredible amount of accuracy, and it goes up exponentially after floor 10 hard. So I think at floor 90 hard, he's got something like 750 accuracy. So if you want to do a resistance strategy, you need to bring decreased accuracy. Tatora is one of the better champions for it because he's got an A1 100% decrease accuracy. Geomancer can do it, but Geomancer's is not 100%. Anax is another champion I've seen several people use. Anax has a 100% decrease accuracy. I believe it's a 3-turn duration on a 3-turn cooldown on, I think this is A2. So he's another champion you could use for this. I like Tatora best because Tatora also brings the block debuffs, which can save you from some of the stuns and the burns. And he brings the veils as well, and I'll tell you why the veils are important when we get to Rector Drath, which we'll get to right now. Rector Drath has a 55% resistance aura in Doom Tower, which is what the aura we're using. She also adds an additional 50 resistance under champions under Veil and Perfect Veil. So that's an additional 100 resistance. Plus we're dropping his accuracy by 50%. Now, when we're talking 750 accuracy, we're now talking 375, and we're now looking for 420-ish resistance on champions. So that's a lot to build. But on floor 10, the resistance are much, much lower. So this additional 100 resistance combined with the Great Hall bonuses can add up to 80 resistance. So once you've maxed your Great Hall resistances, you've got extra 80 resistance there. You got your base resistance. You're getting resistance from some of the other stuff as well. Overall, it makes the resistance much easier to deal with. Why is the resistance important? The more resistance we have, the more we can rely on debuffs to not take some of those bombs and basically then have to try to tank the exploding bombs. The other thing that these veils do is veils help decrease the damage you take on AoE hits. So veils give you additional resistance to those AoE hits from those bombs that are exploding that are usually doing true damage. So one of the few ways you can reduce the true damage of those bombs. Duchess is another champion that you can do it with as well. Duchess also has AoE damage reduction as well. Pythion can assist with this as well. So Rector is not the only option for this. And in fact, Rector I don't use on other accounts as well where I have a similar strat. But Rector's a good champion for this, and I happen to like Rector Drath. I think she's a great champion. But she's got her heals all allies by 20% and puts a perfect veil on them, and then on top of that, she's healing 10% of their max HP every time they get a turn with the perfect veil. And that's where Tatora also helps, is Tatora also brings perfect veil for everyone but himself, so that makes him particularly useful. Nishak is just a bomb champion, so he places 2 bombs here, drops the turn meter by 1, and then can turn those bombs into poisons with his passive if they explode, and then he's got 3 extra bombs he can put in his A1. And mine is built in Relentless gear, built to be very fast, very accurate, and some decent attack. He's probably not the best built champion in my account, but he does this job. He does his job fairly well, gets a ton of bombs out. Great champion for that, and bombs do 300% additional damage against Bommal, I believe. It's a lot of extra damage. So bombs are one of the ways you can deal with Bommal. And unfortunately, there's only a few non-magic bomb champions. Nishak is one of them. Nishak is perfect for this. The problem is, and this is where the resistance comes in, if Nishak does not have resistance, Nishak will kill himself because he will get additional bombs placed on him for every debuff he places on the boss. So that's the way you have to be careful with a bomb strategy. Vogoth is a wonderful, wonderful champion. I've got him in regeneration and immortal, so he's constantly healing just to keep him alive. And what he does is he's got a passive that, no, it's not that passive. It's this passive. When this champion is attacked, heals all allies by 50% of the damage received. So what happens, and it's only 25% damage received from a boss attacks, but the minions are not bosses. So those side bombs that are doing 40 or 50% true damage, they do damage to Vogoth, and then Vogoth heals all that damage back up. So one of them goes off, he heals some of the damage back, and then the other one goes off, and that helps you stay alive. And we'll talk about the turn order as well when we get to that. And then finally, Geo. Most of you guys probably are familiar with Geo, but he's got the burn reflect damage. So he reflects 15% of the damage back on the boss because he gets the burn out of the boss. He also reduces the damage you take by a little bit of damage as well, which is kind of nice. Basically, you're hoping the boss is going to kill himself while you're healing yourself with Vogoth and then throwing bombs on him as well. So that's Geo in a nutshell. Again, he does have the decreased accuracy, but this is a 40% chance to land. That's why it's not reliable if you're looking for a decreased accuracy strategy against Bommal. So we go into the team construction here, and I've got the presets so that they set themselves up so they have everything ready to go in the order I want to against the boss. So against the boss, Rector Drath basically does her thing, but specifically I don't have her use her healing after the first round. In fact, I probably don't use it after that, just in case. Geomancer doesn't use his Quicksand Grasp until then. That gets the turns out. Tatura, I want the decreased accuracy out first, and then he'll do his normal thing. And his normal thing is to hit everybody with the perfect veils first, and then later get this block debuff up. Nishak does his thing, and for the most part, he just does his thing. So I could tune him specifically to save this for the first hit and this for the second hit, but I want to get through the waves somewhat quickly as well. So if I let him do his thing, the waves are cleared better, and he still does a decent job. Plus, I've got a lot of tips to keep him alive. Vogoth, there is no reason to do this provoke and decrease attack, because the decrease attack only lands on champions who have provoke. This doesn't do a lot of damage, so you might as well just have him hit with his A1, and you have no other reason to go. He's decently fast, and that's just to make sure that he regenerates enough to keep himself healed, and that's actually a bigger problem for teams where you need him to heal and you don't have all of the additional healing of a Rector Drath and Tatura providing Veils, and then Rector Drath healing as well. So if it's just him and or another Vogoth, you want that regeneration to keep him alive. So it's a great way to keep him alive for that. So let's save that actually, and then let's go run this against the boss. So the waves aren't too important, so we'll skip to the actual boss itself and show you that when we get to it. Alrighty. So as you can see, Geo did his burn. It does the turn meter steal, so we get an extra one of those bombs out. That's actually a core strat to the reflect damage, is we get a bunch of these extra bombs out, and then we do extra damage as well. So as you can see, everyone's resisting everything. We got a ton of bomb damage out with Nishak. Now he's got a bunch of poisons on him as reflecting damage, and the boss is done pretty quick. In fact, we should be done here once some of these bombs start exploding if the boss doesn't take another turn. Up there's another that. More bombs out there. And then, are we going to kill him, or there we go. That is this team for there. You can see it does a pretty decent job of going through Bommal pretty quickly. It's obviously a lot faster than the solo Ana build, but it is definitely much more gear intensive. You're going to need to build resistance on a lot of champions. And like I said, the one I've brought here runs on 10. I didn't show a lot of the stats because this is not built for 90. The stats are just there. So let's go take a look at what I run on 90. That is my more heavy resistant Geomancer team. It still relies on the same damage to get through to Geomancer and reflect damage, but it is more built about keeping Geomancer alive with Vogoths and other stuff. All right, so this team is full on tank. We're built to keep Geo alive and soak as much damage as possible. This team is slow. It is not as slow as the Lady Annabelle teams. It is slower on the waves because it does not have a lot of wave clear, but overall it does work, and it's actually how I managed to get past Bommal the first time I got past Bommal. So I use Raglan, but you could certainly use a Godseeker as well. Somebody who does additional reviving is good, who does not do a lot of buffs and does additional healing. So Raglan is great because she's got an AoE heal that's a cleanse. It's an okay heal. You get some turn meter boost out of her as well, which doesn't hurt. And then she's got a really good revive on a 2-turn cooldown. So she's constantly taking turns and doing the turn meter. As you can see, I actually have gotten a blessing on her that I haven't actually picked yet. The blessings aren't super important. And I've got her in super fast gear with regeneration. This build I've actually used for one of the Amius things, videos that I made earlier. This will work against Bommal, so it's not really a big deal. If I'm really worried about her staying alive, I could put some immortal gear on her here, and that will help clear that up. This is one of the Vogoths I have. I've got 2 Vogoths. They're both built pretty much the same way. They're built around 200-ish speed with a good amount of defense and HP in regeneration and immortal. Nothing super amazing about them. That's where they're at. Doom Priest is in Relentless. Doom Priest offers healing to absolutely everybody and cleanses off debuffs as well, so she can be very good at keeping the burns and the stuns off of when the bombs explode on you, because you are going to get bombs that are going to explode on your champions. So that is worth looking at. Be careful with her. If she criticals, she puts an increased crit rate buff, and that can actually be a problematic thing, because if you get a buff stripped, you suddenly turn it into a bomb, and so that could actually be enough damage to kill somebody. So you want to avoid crit rate with her if you're struggling to make the content work properly. If once you're actually at a comfortable spot where you don't need to worry that much about that margin of error, then it's not as big of a deal. You do also want to turn off her A2 against the boss, however, because you don't need that increased attack. It's not doing anything in a reflect damage team like this. And then Geo, it's the same Geo we have beforehand. This is actually my Geo that I use in Iron Twins. Very fast, high accuracy, kind of tanky. He's a Geo. So let's go take a look at the run, and we're going to not bother with the waves, and we'll get back to it when the boss comes in. But the waves are definitely slower on this team, so we'll be right back. All right, so we'll pick up here. We are almost through the waves. As you can see, we're running close to 3 minutes on time just through the waves. Not a very fast team, but here we go. So generally, the idea of this is that Geomancer is going to get out his burns and reflect damage, and then everyone else is going to keep people alive. Now, one of the important things about this team and about the previous team is, where is Vogoth? The way damage works in Raid is Vogoth takes damage first, then the next champion in line, the next champion in line, next champion in line, and then finally the Vogoth and Bath takes damage. So we're dealing with multiple bombs in this particular scenario and healing a lot of damage. So what happened is one Vogoth, who's regenerating himself a lot, takes some damage, heals everybody to make sure that they have enough damage to be able to take a bomb damage. A bomb then does damage to everybody else and then hits the last Vogoth, who then heals everyone back up again. That's why sandwiching your team between 2 Vogoths makes them pretty close to immortal against this particular boss. Now, they still need to be able to regen a little bit, because as you can see, the Vogoths themselves are taking a little bit of damage. That's also where Doom Priest comes in to bring additional healing to them. That's also where Raglan comes in to bring some additional healing, and she's there for the revival to pick somebody back up just in case. Again, it doesn't need to be a Raglan. Godseeker works just as well. Syl is okay, other than Syl has some debuffs that she could possibly do in turn meter control, which could be problematic. Elva would probably work okay, and you could turn off her stuff as well. But hey, we actually managed through the boss particularly well. Given we took 4 minutes and 17 seconds, it took us about 1.5 minutes on the boss. Overall, this team's been pretty successful to me as well. Again, some bit of flex out there. I really like Doom Priest. I guess you could certainly go with a double Doom Priest and double Vogoth if you wanted to do this with all epics as well. That would work just fine. As I said, Godseeker works. Maybe a Syl might work. Maybe an Elva might work. There's other options for that. But overall, the Geo Reflecting is a great way to get past this as well. I'm not using my Vogoths for much else outside of this particular content. My Raglan, her build is a good generic build. Doom Priest is a fairly good generic Doom Priest build as well. And my Geomancer, it happens to be my Geomancer from Iron Twins, but it could easily be a Hydra Geomancer as well, because its stats don't need to be quite so high as they do need to be in Iron Twins, even against the final boss on Stro 90. So hopefully that's some ways to get through Bommal, and hopefully that gives you some insight into some teams that you can build. Hopefully one of them will fit some of your style of what you can do. There are certainly other teams you can use. You could use ally attackers with a ton of bombers and just try to bomb the heck out of them. That's actually a perfectly viable strategy as well. I found that this one worked fairly well before bombs really became a good meta against him. So I like this one and I keep using it. So hopefully this has been helpful for you too. I appreciate you guys hanging around. I'm Bront CatHerder.